Good morning. Hi, I'm glad to see everybody here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alessandra Wall. I'm a psychologist and a life and nutrition coach here in San Diego. And I'm really excited to get to talk to you today about how to get unstuck and on with your goals. I want to let you know a little bit about how we're going to do this today. Basically, the first 30 minutes or so are going to be a presentation. And I'm going to ask everybody to hold on to their questions until the end of the presentation so that those of you who have to get back to work or have to get on with your day can do so promptly in 30 minutes. The last 30 minutes, if anybody has any questions or anybody wants to see how we can apply this model to a goal they're using, or just has a question in general about getting unstuck and reaching your goals, then I'm going to open up the chat publicly. And you can start posting your questions. I'll read them off and answer them to my best knowledge. So before we start, I would like to take a few minutes to tell you why I do what I do. Fundamentally, I am someone who believes that people can thrive, right? But I think that we go about it the wrong way. And I have so many other talks I want to give on this and talk about the difference between being happy and being fulfilled and being satisfied, and how sometimes we're pursuing the wrong things and trying to get to one area of our life, but that's for another day. As a psychologist and a life coach, I spend most of my days working with people who are trying to make changes in their lives and create goals in order to live better. And if they're working with me, chances are people are falling off of their path to reaching these goals. And I've found over time that there are 3 reasons why most people fall off of their path. The first reason is that, and this happens especially the older we get, I find, is that people make goals or set goals that don't necessarily match their values or their needs currently. So people might say, you know, when I was 20, I really wanted to be the best in my field, or I really wanted to achieve certain notoriety. And now in their late 30s or 40s or early 50s, they're setting goals based on things that they wanted in their 20s that don't necessarily match how they think, what they want, what they need or value later on in life. The second reason is that I think most people don't understand why they do what they do, or in this case, why they're not doing what they say they want to do. And the third thing is that lots of people get great advice and create amazing strategies and plans to achieve their goals, but the plans, although right, aren't right for them. They don't necessarily fit who they are and what they want or how they live currently. So, you know, with the internet, what ends up happening is we have access to so much information, so much expert knowledge on how to do things. But just because an expert, including me, tells you that there's a way of doing something, doesn't mean that that way is going to be right for you as is. And so there's some tweaking that needs to come into place. So today, I'm actually really going to focus on that second point. That is, not knowing why you do what you do, or more importantly, not knowing why you're not doing what you say you want to do. And what I want you to get out of this, what I want you to understand, is that the reason you're not reaching your goals is not because you're lazy or unmotivated or too busy. Chances are, and this is especially true if you have a great plan, that if you're not moving forward, if you're stuck, it's because of certain assumptions, thoughts, and feelings you have about the changes you're trying to make. And once you understand those, you can actually come up with a plan that's not only right, but that's right for you. So to deal with this, both as a coach and of course as a psychologist, I go back to my roots in psychology. And I want to help you understand how your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors all connect together. And I'm going to use the cognitive behavioral model to explain that, but most models in psychology say exactly the same thing. The nice thing with this model is that it's user-friendly. So let me see. I'm going to open a browser, new tab in your browser, and you're just going to have a PDF copy of this model You can look at it if you want to, or you can just hold on to it while I speak, but at least you have a visual of what I'm talking about. So let me give you my standard example. Let's say you won the lottery. How do you think you would feel? Most people I ask this question to will say that they will feel ecstatic, excited. Actually, the lottery here in California, I think it's California, or no, one of the national ones, right, was just at $500 million. I play the lottery when it gets that high. I play the lottery all the time. It's just fun. It's a nice way to dream. And I love thinking about what I would do if I won the lottery. So if you ask me how I would feel if I won the lottery, I would be one of those ecstatic people. But sometimes when I ask that question to people, their answer is anxious, scared, worried. What's the difference? Why is it that some people at the thought of winning the lottery are going to react with excitement and others are going to react with fear? The situation hasn't changed. The difference is thoughts, right? The first group, people like me, when we consider winning the lottery, we're thinking about the freedom that we can purchase with that money. The freedom to travel, the freedom in my case to build my business like as fast as I want to, the freedom to get out of debt. There's a lot of those people who get anxious. What are they thinking about? Well, it's been interesting. I've been polling some of these anxious people, and there are a couple things that come up. One of the things that the people who winning the lottery feel anxious about is how that amount of money might change their relationships with the people they love. And I think there was actually a documentary out about that the other day, that people who win huge, huge sums of money suddenly, even if they had really good connections before, tend to get very isolated later and lose a lot of friendships. In workshops I've run, I've heard people tell me that their worries would be about how to manage that amount of money properly. And then there's always the Uncle Sam's going to come and take 50% of my money, or everybody's going to come out and start trying to get my money thoughts. Assumptions, those thoughts are what drive the person's emotions, right? It's not winning the lottery that makes us excited or anxious. It's what we assume winning the lottery will do for us. Why is this important? Well, here's the connection. There's that behavior piece I was just talking about. What behaviors do, what they're designed to do, is they're designed to help regulate our emotional states. This is biologically, neurologically what the behaviors are designed to do. They're designed to help us regulate our emotional states, right? So this happens at a very basic level. But it also happens at a very deep, cognitive, psychological, and complex level. So what I choose to do in any given situation is actually designed to help me address my emotion, which exists because of my assumption, right? And what is reaching a goal? Reaching a goal is about implementing certain behaviors to make changes. So a behavior that I say I want to implement, despite having the best laid out plans, then really one of the things I need to do is to go back and understand what's the connection between that behavior and my feelings, and my feelings and my thoughts. Without understanding that connection, chances are I'm going to stay stuck. So I want to talk about this, and the easiest thing for me is to give a personal example, and then I'm going to also give you guys an example from one of my clients that I work with. So several years ago, I started making a lot of changes in my life. I was, generally speaking, pretty happy on paper, should have been really thriving, and I wasn't. So I started looking at what things in my life I needed to change. And one of the things I noticed is that I was constantly tired. I was a new mother of two, so it's understood that I should be tired, but still, I knew I was tired because I didn't have very much patience. I woke up every day really, really tired. I had low energy, and the only people I really had enough patience for were the people I worked with and strangers, right? Because I don't have a choice with them. So I would tell myself, well, you know, tonight I'm just going to go to bed earlier. Makes sense. Super easy to do. Well, it didn't happen, right? It's important to know this, and I should have mentioned this. I how important sleep is to mental health, to physical health, to well-being, to cognitive capacity. So it's not like I didn't have the knowledge to understand why this was important, nor the knowledge to implement it, since I helped. So the next thing I decided is, well, I should probably have a plan, because I can't just make this change really easily. And my plan was twofold. I wanted to, in a 2-month period, get to bed an hour and a half earlier. So I was going to make it incremental. And in order to do that, I decided I was going to turn off the television and turn off my computer a half an hour before the time I was deciding to go to bed. And that I would start the first couple of weeks just trying to get to bed a half an hour earlier, not a full hour and a half. So turning off screens was really easy. I didn't have any trouble doing that. I'm not a huge fan of being in front of screens a whole bunch of times, so there was nothing assumption-wise standing in the way of that. But despite not being kind of zoned out in front of TV or sound, what ended up happening is I would still stay up, either reading and spending a lot of time reading, or moving around the house getting things done, and I wasn't going to bed any earlier. Every morning, same thing, I would wake up tired, exhausted, grumpy, and it would really bother me. And I say this because I want people to understand the motivated, not unmotivated. I did not lack the knowledge of how to do this. And I'm not a lazy person. And if I were, going to sleep would be easy, right? So I had to stop and ask myself, what is it about going to bed being the situation, right? What is it about doing this that I don't want? And I realized I had this really specific connection with staying up. So as somebody who works helping people, and as a parent, my day is spent answering other people's needs. And nighttime was the only time of the day where I had a calm, peaceful environment, and I did not owe anybody anything. Right? My husband goes to bed earlier than me, so it was my time. By asking myself to give up that time, I was creating a lot of grief, a huge sense of loss. I didn't know what to do with that, with the fact that I had not created in my environment any other space to take care of myself. So now came the time, in order to get unstuck, to create a sub-goal that would help me reach my final goal. My final goal was still to go to bed an hour and a half earlier, right? I mean, that was not going to change. But turning off my screens and just telling myself, putting on an alarm, whatever, asking my husband to remind me to go to bed earlier, was not the right sub-goal to get me to my end point. What I found out I had to do in order to reach my overall goal was create behaviors within my day that that responded to or helped regulate that need, that emotion to take care of myself, right? That need to take care of myself. And so it was small things. Like I started putting a timer at work that would ring 30 minutes before the end of my lunch break. And yes, I take an hour lunch break. So it used to be that I took that whole hour and I would work during the whole hour. And now what I do is I'd work the first 30 minutes of the hour lunch break, and then the last 30 minutes I would sit and do nothing. I would eat. I would stare into space. I would listen to music. But I would recreate what I was getting at nighttime, which was this very quiet, unstimulating environment. I also started taking coffee breaks. And I would just take 2 or 3 minutes of just grabbing my coffee and drinking it in silence. And I started practicing, was going to be meditation, but it turned into daydreaming. So I would practice moments of daydreaming for 2 to 3 minutes several times a day. What happened is, by understanding what my assumptions were about creating this new behavior, about reaching this goal I wanted, I was able to address fears, address resistance, address roadblocks through sub-goals. And then going to bed earlier was a breeze. By that point, having created that space in my life, I was able to make the changes I wanted to make and start going to bed earlier. And when I don't, which happens still, it's usually because I'm stressed. And it's a really, really good marker now to let me know, hey, you have this general goal, you want to achieve it, you're not following through, what's going on? Oh, this means you're not taking care of yourself in other areas of your life or throughout your day, right? So let me give you an example from one of my clients. I do nutrition counseling. And so I see a lot of people who come in and are trying to make changes with diet. And these people are smart. These people are knowledgeable. Usually by the time they get to me, they have spent several years trying to eat more healthily. They have yo-yo dieted. I've worked with people who've been able to maintain changes a few months. I've worked with people who say that they haven't been able to maintain a change for more than 3 days, right? But one thing that's clear is they're not coming to me without the knowledge of how to eat healthily, and they're certainly not coming to me without the motivation to do so. So I had this client, and we really were working on having her eat. Our primary goal, our initial goal, was to eliminate trigger foods at home. This is often a really good starting point, and you'll see in the expert advice, making your home a safe environment is very, very common. You want to get rid of foods that you can't control yourself with. So great expert advice. It's the right advice, but it wasn't working for her. Time and time again, we try to empty the house, and it might stay empty a few days, but oftentimes she would leave my office saying, I'm going to do this, and it wouldn't happen. So after running into this wall a few times, we sat back and we said, what's happening? In our sessions together, she was motivated, she wanted to do this. But there was a roadblock. And the roadblock wasn't strategy, because this was really simple to implement. And the goal is a good goal. It's a necessary starting goal point for where she wanted to go. What we discovered was two things. The thought of not having those foods around made her really anxious. The thought of being overweight made her really anxious. The thought of being pre-diabetic made her really anxious and miserable and sad. But the thought of not having those foods around made her so anxious that it created this huge roadblock to moving forward with her goal. Why did it make her anxious? Because like most of us, she's an emotional eater. So she's somebody who, if she was stressed, if she was sad, would reach for that food and eat it and feel immediately slightly better, a little bit more soothed. The problem was she wasn't able to control that behavior, so it was taking place too often. I didn't want to change the overall goal. You oftentimes, if you have the right goals, you don't need to change them. You just need to find a different way of getting there. And that different way can't just be based on expert advice. It has to be based on what's right for you. So for this person, had to do with teaching her better coping methods. One of the thoughts in her mind was, I'm not capable. I'm not capable. I can't do it, right? And as long as that thought was present in her mind, she was never, ever, ever going to be able to make a change. I can't handle being stressed. I can't survive being anxious. I'm not strong enough to do this. Those roadblocks are there, and they're just as powerful as a time constraint or a financial constraint might be in achieving somebody's goals, right? So we did two things. One is I taught her deep breathing methods. I encourage anybody here listening, if you haven't learned how to do deep breathing and you haven't learned any like meditation or self-soothing exercises, do them. They're free. They work really well. They're extremely effective to deal with anxiety. So I taught her how to calm her body down. And the other thing is that we taught her how to challenge that thought, right, of I'm not capable. Now, this person wasn't a therapy patient. They were a coaching client. So I sent them off with exercises to do, and I sent them off with things to practice. We weren't going into the nitty-gritty details of where the emotional eating had started or any of that. But we created new sub-goals, which were, well, you got to learn how to calm yourself down in order to achieve her endpoint goal. So I hope that when I open this up to the chat, some of you might have some goals you want to share with us. And I've had, in doing this with people work on goals as simple as stopping to bite their teeth, and goals as complicated as the eating goal or making a change with their job, right? But what I want you to take away from this is, first of all, if you're stuck, it's not because you're lazy. It's probably not because you don't have enough time. And it's certainly not because you're unmotivated. And chances are, it's not you don't have the right information on hand. Most people are stuck because they lack insight. They don't understand why they do what they do, or why they don't do what they do. Or sorry, why they don't do what they say they want to do, right? Once we understand that, we can create goals that meet our personal needs. And that's how we get unstuck, right? It sometimes is a complicated and long process, like my person who was working, on changing her dietary habits and getting her house clear of food. And sometimes it's very simple. You can just by stopping and looking at these things, you have these aha moments and you're like, oh, of course, this is why I'm not doing what I say I'm going to do. And this is the step I need to take in order to get there. And this other thing I was trying to do is not going to work until I do this, this, and this, and I can address these issues, right? And if it's simple, that's great. But if ever it's difficult, or if ever you feel like you need help getting unstuck or moving forward with goals, then, I invite you to come to Life in Focus and look at some of the services we have. What I talked about today is part of the Change of Heart program. And that's kind of my go-to thing. It's what I use because it's one of the most useful things I can help people with. And I have it as an e-course and as a one-on-one intensive coaching course. But the other thing that I'm actually really excited about sharing with you right now is that I have a new coaching program that's going to be starting. It's the Focus Equation. It's going to be in its second session starting March 2nd. And the Focus Equation is a 6-week coaching program that's designed to help you identify the values and needs I was talking about earlier and create goals that meet those values and needs so we don't run into that barrier. And then learn how to move past those roadblocks so that you can succeed to thrive. So if you remember the 3 things I mentioned earlier, the 3 reasons I think most people fall off track. They were creating goals or pursuing goals that don't match currently what they need or value. 2, not knowing why they're doing what they're doing, or not understanding why they're not doing what they say they want. And 3, following expert advice or following advice or plans that are right and great, but aren't necessarily tailored to who they are and how they live their life. The Focus Equation addresses all 3 of those in a group coaching format. So in addition to weekly coaching calls, the people signed up get tools, homework, tips, and then the best part, as far as I'm concerned, is that they become part of a community board. And the community board is comprised of me and everybody else in the program. And so the community board is a lifetime membership, meaning that even after the 6-week coaching program, if people are still working on goals and still have questions and still need help, they just need to start entering them, and they'll get advice from the people who are there, but also will get advice from me because I'll be checking the board daily. So again, you have the PDF that talks about this cycle. And when you really think about getting unstuck, one of the easy ways or easier ways to understand why you might be getting stuck is to start looking at why a certain behavior has significance for you, what assumptions you're making about it, and then to start creating goals, start creating a plan to address those assumptions and those needs, because behaviors biologically are designed to regulate emotional states, and your emotional states are derived from the assumptions and thoughts you have about a certain situation. So I am going to